Hello, welcome to Reflections. My name is Zack Browning. I'm the preacher at the Reedland Christian Church, and I'm hosting today's episode of Reflections. This is a 30-minute television program produced by Paducah Cooperative Ministry, and we are doing God's work with human hands, and that's what our mission is. Many churches and community organizations from the Paducah area get together and serve God the best way that they can with their funds, their time, and their resources. And we're going to talk a little bit about an aspect of some of those churches today. We're going to discuss youth ministry. I have 3 youth ministers with us and would like to introduce those. In fact, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Mike, you want to start us?
Sure. My name is Mike Darling. I'm the associate minister at Reedland Church of Christ. I deal a lot with youth and family ministry in my role there, and have been at the church going on almost 5 years.
Excellent. Josh.
My name is Josh Ottwell. I'm the youth minister at Community Christian Church over in Metropolis. Been doing that almost 3.5 years now.
Very cool. Todd?
Todd Belt. I'm with Woodlawn Presbyterian Church in Farley, and been there almost 6 years now. I'm youth leader, bookkeeper, do several little things, so they keep me busy.
Excellent. Before I was in preaching and God called me into the pulpit, I was a youth minister for 5 years, served at a couple churches up in Southern Illinois, so I think all of us have had some war stories that we can probably share when it comes to youth ministry, and that's what I want to do today. I just want to have a conversation about youth ministry. I know God has called us. The last thing Christ said before he left the planet was go into all nations and evangelizing them, teaching them the things that I've taught you, that sharing the gospel, and that's what youth ministry is in the broad sense, is sharing that gospel of what we believe and why we believe that with young people. But more directly, I'd like for each of you to kind of share a vision of what your idea of youth ministry would be. So, Todd, you want to kind of start us out with that?
I think I started out, of course, I'm uneducated in all this, and I just got the call in ministry about 7 years ago, and started out with this vision of, they're not, and I don't know who said this, so I can't give them credit, but they're not going to care what you know until they know that you care. And so I think a big aspect of what I do is build relationships, and get to know them and care about what they do. And from that is just, once you've got that relationship, then they can see in your life, the difference that Christ makes, and hopefully I come across that way. So that's kind of where I go, how I proceed in mine is building the relationships and then sharing Christ. So.
Excellent, amen. Josh?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that at our church recently in terms of building relationships, and that Christianity itself is a relationship. That's the very basis of it, is your relationship with Jesus Christ. And what I see myself as a youth minister is equipping parents to disciple their children. That is what I wish that I did a lot better, but that doesn't happen as well as I wish it did. And really just to be a model of what it means to have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
So. Excellent, Mike?
It's hard for me to disagree with anything they've said. I mean, ministry at its core is about relationship with each other, and about drawing people into relationship with God. And I try my hardest to incorporate our young people into the lives of their families and into the overall family of the church. And my goal in doing that is to, instill in them 2 things, the love of God and the love of others. And somehow through that process, hopefully inspiring them to be Jesus people in whatever situations, circumstances that they find themselves.
Awesome. It's so refreshing to hear that, because a lot of times, I know when I was doing youth ministry, it seemed that personally, I had to fight with that entertainment aspect of it, where it seemed like if you weren't setting something on fire, there wasn't an elephant pulling a jet plane in your parking lot, just something over the top crazy that you weren't going to attract kids. And it's so neat to see that there's that relationship building, and I think that is a big deal. And I think that's something you guys probably, I know I fought it, a good 5 to 6 years ago, and the technology has come full circle. Josh and I have talked before a couple times about it's hard to compete with just what they have in the palm of their hand. They've got an iPod or a phone that's got all these apps and games and stuff. How do you temper the message of Christ with some fun activities, yet not border into that infotainment where you're trying to entertain, yet give that? How do you challenge that?
I think I tried a lot of that to begin with, as far as they had a some things in place, with a previous youth pastor, and I tried to go along that line and have game night and all these different things, and it just never really worked. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I don't use technology and that sort of thing. I mean, I have a PowerPoint every week and whatnot to kind of keep them interacting with it, but there's not a whole lot more than the message that we do. Now we have PlayStation and Wii and all that kind of stuff for after or before the message, but mostly, I don't do any of the big boom stuff, but because it wasn't working for me, and the building relationships and sitting and talking and that sort of thing has been what's worked, and so and not that. That's all I'm about, but we want to get this message across to them, and that is what we're about. So
Cool. Yeah.
My experience with it comes from the other side of it, from being the student, being in that kind of youth ministry. At times, not with my home church, but another church that I went to their youth programs a lot of times. And when I look back on it, I don't remember all those stupid games that we played, and I don't remember all the silly things that we did. I remember the relationships that I built with people in that group, both the adults and the students. And I can look back at the students that were there and see how many of them have fallen away from their faith and have no involvement in church whatsoever, or a very marginal involvement. And I don't want to put forth effort into those kind of things when I know in the long run that they're not going to last. But the relationship side of it is what does last.
Excellent.
I think those of us in youth ministry have found that the fun things, the entertainment things, I mean, they can draw the kids in. But what we found is that it doesn't lead to much else. It's not what transforms them. God is the one that transforms them, and so our goal is to be as involved in their lives as we can, to build those relationships, to not get caught up in trying to compete with entertaining them, because our culture is full of things that their sole purpose is to gain their attention and to entertain them. And we've got to show them a different message, that there's something else worth living for, that it's not all about entertainment, that so much of what is entertainment in this world is really just a facade that at some point will pass away.
Sure.
But we want to call them to something deeper.
I think kids are really good at recognizing that too. They can see you up there. They know that I'm faking it. If I'm going to be the extremely bubbly, crazy, bouncing off the walls kind of youth minister, they're going to be able to tell that is fake and that is not me one bit, and that is not going to help me build any kind of trust and any kind of relationship with those students.
Right. They want something authentic.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they have this kind of radar that really, they can pick up on it right away. If you're not authentic, they don't really have any interest in what you have to offer.
That is awesome. I'm kind of like Todd. I don't remember who said this, so I can't give him credit, but I've heard the old saying, what you win them with is what you win them to. And if you're winning them with video games and, flashy PowerPoint presentations and movies, if that's the only purpose, I'm kind of like you, Todd. I will use technology in that, but if that's the only thing that gets in there, that's what you've won them to. And when that fades away, when the flashy music and the real big band, or whatever it is that you're using to draw people in, when that goes away, they don't have anything. But when you win them with Christ in relationships, you're there for them. You're the guy that they're talking to at 3 a.m. when something horrible just happened on Facebook, or you're getting a phone call from them, saying, "Hey, I can't believe that this just went down. I really need somebody to talk to."
I remember just recently apologizing. I was giving the kid a ride home, afterwards, and I said, "I'm sorry I talked so long tonight. I really meant to give y'all more free time." And she was like, "Don't apologize." She said, "What you're saying is good stuff," and that was one of the biggest compliments I ever remember, getting is knowing that, that the talking, that they were actually there to hear me talk, or maybe some of them anyway. So.
Sure. I think we see this too pan out as our young people age. Because I don't know if it's with you guys too, but I see this in a lot of churches, including our own, that as our students graduate high school and move on into college and other endeavors, a lot of them are leaving the church. Because for so long we've created this kind of youth group environment of fun and entertainment and things, and they continue looking for that when they move on, and they don't really ever find it. And so I think it's our job more so to teach them how to belong as members of the family of believers, even at a young age, that they are a part of a church that will carry them on and have deeper roots and connections, so that hopefully that they'll continue to be involved in a faith community even as they age, rather than leave it.
I heard a statistic just this week that 70% of students are out of church within 1 year of graduating high school.
Wow.
And that's extremely disheartening and an extreme challenge that needs to be met in terms of the church as a whole. And one thing that I read in a book recently was talking about, especially in churches that have an entirely separate youth Sunday service, they have no idea how to transition from that youth service to the typical Sunday morning service if there's no parent there dragging them sometimes to get there or encouraging them to get there. But 70%, that you can look back at your own youth groups and look back at mine and see the number of people that have fallen away. And a lot of times they were the strongest, most committed student while they were in high school.
Sure. And I think that's a good point. I know doing children's church is what we call our 1st through 5th graders. When I was at the last church I did youth ministry with, it was a lot of that infotainment, and I didn't even realize it. I always had a lesson. There was always biblical principles taught, but a lot of times there was just so many things going on that you forget that if you're doing these science experiments that have a point, you're relating them to the Bible, but you're having them get up and be active and do things and sing these songs that they're not going to be singing out in church and all this activity, and then you ask them to come in and sit in a seat for 45 minutes and to listen to 1 or 2 people at the most, speak, whereas they were doing 14 or 15 things. That's a huge social adjustment for the child, let alone cognitively. Mentally, they're not able to process a lot of that stuff, and that's something that it's a challenge for us to bridge that gap. We need to give them some information and really teach them the biblical principles as a young person in a way that they can wrap their head around it. But how do you do that? How do you get them ready so that when they leave, they don't become part of that 70%, that we can keep them, within the church?
Well, that's the big discussion that's out there right now.
Exactly.
We're not claiming to be full of answers, but what we are is full of passion for changing those statistics. We don't want to see that continue, and so I think at its core, it is a lot about relationships. It's about connecting our young people with other people in the church. I have a strong passion for intergenerational ministry, and getting our kids connected with our older folks in the church, and realizing that there's something beautiful about those relationships, and they both can have mutual interest in each other's lives, and doing that across the board. Our young people probably are at a point where they don't really always want to be around their own parents. But I think they can connect very easily with other people's parents. And you see that happen all the time. They want adults to be involved in their lives, no matter what they say.
Sure.
And we have an opportunity to make a big difference if we can connect some of those relationships, I think.
Parents, I think, can be either the greatest detriment to a child's spiritual growth, but they can also be the greatest asset to their spiritual growth. And I know when I look at my church and look at the students who have kind of trickled off over the years, one thing that is almost always constant in those situations is that the father does not come to church. And I don't know about you guys if you would look at your groups and see if that is pretty consistent, but I can think of half a dozen students that don't come or come pretty sporadically, and their father's not there. And I think they have that excuse, well, Dad's not going to church today. Why do I have to do it? And that is huge to have both parents there in order to help continue once they graduate high school. And I think you and I have talked about this, Zach, and I know I've talked about it with my home minister. And this doesn't necessarily change the way we do ministry, but we often say that the children are the future of our church.
Yeah.
But they're not the future of our church, really. Like the students that graduate from my youth group most likely are not going to be there in 5 years or 10 years. They're not going to be raising their families in my church. They might be raising their families in one of your 2 churches or in another church somewhere across the country and across the state. So there's a real challenge, I think, there for us to get students to understand, and as they grow up and get married and have kids, to take the initiative themselves to get themselves plugged into church.
Sure. I know that so many times we give lip service to the idea that the American family is being torn apart. And we, at the church, we say, oh, it's being destroyed. Our kids are away from our parents. They're working too many hours. They've got so much going on. And at the church sometimes we either work around that because parents' schedules are so busy and they've got this many practices we've got soccer and basketball and this and that, and that's just the one child. How do we combat that? Even in the way we do things, you separate them out into this adult Sunday school class and this young Sunday school class. We've talked a lot about that in certain circumstances. How do you how do you get that family back to the core and start those relationships? Todd, how do you see that making some progress?
Well, that's a hard one for me, just because basically the kids that I have come to my youth group, most of their parents don't even come to church, and so we have a Wednesday night program where we did Awanas, and now we're doing a thing that we kind of created our own called Inside Out, but it's basically that same type of program, and the kids kind of just come up through there, and when they hit 6th grade or 7th grade, actually, they'll come downstairs to the youth program, and it's really almost, they just feel like it's an extension, of that, and so I don't have a lot of parents to deal with, which I guess sometimes can be a blessing, but it can be definitely bad, because you got to get those parents involved. I go around to the schools or a few of the schools and teach an abstinence program, and one of the statistics in there that kids through their teen years, from 13 to to the day they turn 20, will spend 40,000 hours with some type of media. Whether it be TV, internet, whatever it is. In that same time period, they're only in school for 11,000 hours. And in that same time period, they only spend about 2,000 hours with their parents. And that, when I first read that, I was like, I'm not sure that. But since then, I've got my own teenager, and who's plays basketball and soccer and baseball and all these things. And even when we're together, when I'm at the ball game with him, he's on the floor, I'm up in the stands, and so that quality time that we get is very small. And realizing that I've only got those 2,000 hours or so through his teenage years has made me try to capitalize on that time that we're together, and so I think that's the message we probably need to get out to parents, is that you have a very limited time left. Especially once your kids hit the teen years, you have got to capitalize on that time, and when you're in the car together, whatever, bring up and talk and subjects and. But as far as bringing them together in church, I mean, I had never thought about that, how we separate them, but we do, even from the little kids to the teenagers, and they don't make that transition very well, which I think we've been talking about, and I hate to keep going back to the same word, but relationship is the key. If they've got a relationship with you, even a relationship with more people in the church, then they're going to be apt to make that transition, rather than because it's not the same. Big church, as we call it, doesn't look like youth ministry, and it doesn't look like children's ministry. But if they've got those relationships and intergenerational ministry, then they're going to be more apt to make that turn, and because they have people that they know that care about them and are involved in their lives. And so
you bring up a really good point, and that's something that I dealt with in one or two occasions, and it was probably some of the best youth ministry I was ever able to do. Do you guys end up becoming the parents in some respects, to where there are parents that work a lot, or there's a single parent home where there's not a lot of tension? Do you end up having to fill that role? Because you mentioned you have kids that don't have parents that come to your church. Do you, even just in that hour that you're with them, or in other aspects, do you end up having to be a part of their life in that respect?
I think sometimes we fill sort of that role. Whether it's a single parent family or a divorced parent situation, sometimes probably our young people are looking for things that maybe they're not receiving in the home, and that could be sometimes some delicate
yes.
And often kind of dangerous situations in terms of how we respond to that, because ultimately we need to be pointing them to God and seeing how we can provide healthy relationships and not just provide kind of a momentary fill in their emptiness or a crutch for them, but bring them back to understanding what it means to have healthy relationships. I don't know, you guys experience that more?
I know with my own kids, we even though they're not our kids, we always refer to them as our kids.
Yeah.
I know I do, more than our students. Most of my students have both parents at home.
Awesome.
And I know that I've talked with Zack about this and with other people. I'm extremely blessed to have students that are pretty much all straight A honor roll students, and have both parents at home for the most part, and have country club memberships. And I do a very different type of youth ministry than I know a lot of other people do, that have a lot of kids that come from broken homes and kind of have to be that father kind of figure to certain people. I just haven't had the experience of having to be that type of youth minister to people.
You know, something that Todd mentions, you know, that it's tough sometimes when you have all of your kids coming from families where parents aren't really involved. I mean, sometimes the tough thing, and maybe even the sad thing, is that lots of our families and lots of other families in other churches can be just as absent when it comes to faith, because they're not involved in a way that deepens the faith of the family together and really challenges those students to develop their own faith. And I think a lot of that takes place in the busyness of our lives. We schedule our lives as full as we can, and then we get to the point where we say, well, I don't have time for God, or I don't have time for being a part of a church family. And that's a misconception. I mean, we really need to help people understand that God is at the center, at the core of what we do, and everything flows, you know, from there. That God is ever a part of all these things. And then we have to figure out how we address the busyness of our lives, because what we find in Scripture doesn't call us to lead, I think, quite as busy of lives as we try to do.
Yeah, Todd mentioned that parents spend 2,000 hours with their teenager. Us as youth ministers spend, maybe 300-400 hours with those students over those same years. And I think a lot of what needs to be done is for us to empower parents. There's a youth ministry that I was reading about where all of their events, when they have big youth events, are father-daughter, mother-daughter. They're all family-oriented. There's always one or both parents coming to whatever the event is. And they do events that will draw in some of the parents of those kids that aren't there, that their parents aren't in church and aren't going to come to a church event. And they do barbecues and things that are not at the church in order to get some of those parents there. And they have a time where they split the parents and the kids up, and they talk to the parents about parenting kind of issues and other things in regards to their kids. So
I think you bring up a really good point, Josh. Whether it's, you know, an absence of a parent in the house, or even if you've got both of them there, there's so much available. You know, we talked a little bit about you know, the phones, and you've got all these applications and games that are on there. But there's a lot of kids that are out there today that really don't have a need in their life. You know, even if they don't have both parents, they've got 3 meals a day on their table. They have you know, a house over their head, and it might change from day to day, but they've got a warm bed to sleep in. They have a lot of friends. They have a really enjoyable life. Sometimes some of the best ministry happens out of brokenness. How do you minister to kids that really aren't broken, or if they are broken, don't realize that they're broken?
One thing that I think I'm going to try to do with my kids is I want to take them from their nice little comfortable setting and take them to a place where they have to experience broken people.
Yes.
We're going to be going to Maine this coming summer, in July, to Kennebunk, Maine, and we're just going to be doing housework for people who can't afford to have it, to pay for it to be done. We're going to be doing, redoing people's roofs. We're going to be painting. We're going to be doing cleaning in people's houses. We're just going to go and work with underprivileged and broken peoples. And I really hope that that's going to open my kids' eyes to the fact that there are hurting and broken people around them. We're starting a study just last Sunday night that we are never more like Jesus than when we are reaching out to the hurting and the lonely. And that's what I want my students to get over this 6 weeks. And when we go to Maine in July, got some friends heading to Africa here within the year, and I want to go in 3 or 4 years and take these kids to Africa to see the brokenness and all that is over there. I think with my kind of kids, the kids that don't necessarily have a lot of needs and that don't have a lot of brokenness in their lives, they need to go and experience other people's brokenness to see that it does exist.
I think it's about broadening their world perspective, you know, that they're realizing that there's a whole lot bigger than their own immediate sphere. You know, it's easy for teenagers, it's easy for all of us to be so focused on ourselves and what we're involved in that we lose sight of so much more beyond, you know, our own backyards. And so sometimes it's just making our students aware of those opportunities. You know, we're involved in a camp in the summer called Camp Barnabas, and it's a camp for children with special needs. And that's been one way that we've been able to open the eyes of our students to seeing and experiencing people who aren't like them, but seeing Jesus in them, seeing the beauty of God's creation in them, and being exposed to that has done wonders, I think, for reshaping how they see the world and how they see people.
Cool. Yeah, for sure.
I think I'm a child of divorce, and when I used to look back, I thought I had a rough childhood, but as I get to know some of the kids that I deal with and see what they go through, and it's not anywhere. I had a great childhood, in comparative, but like you said, there is a step beyond that. I've got a buddy that just got back from Colombia, and he was talking about, the devastation and just poorness there, that it's unreal. We are so blessed. Even the roughest place around here and the hardest, situations at home are still so much better than the rest of the country, and making them aware of that realize, even in what seems to be rough, hey, I've only got a PlayStation 2, I don't have a PlayStation 3. Yeah. Oh, I'm so, abused. That's, to play. Some kids overseas would be so blessed to have a PlayStation 1. Exactly. There's always somebody that you got to show them, that you are blessed. And as a nation, I think the United States is so rich comparatively. So.
And sometimes it's a matter of, our kids may not be experiencing brokenness now, but we live in a fallen world. We live in a broken world. Eventually, that brokenness is going to come. So at some level, it may be just about us being in a place where we or other people of faith become the people that they turn to when they experience that brokenness. And that only comes, because of what we're talking about, because we're involved in their lives, because we involve other people in their lives, because those relationships are built, firm, where they know where they can turn, because they'll attempt to turn to a lot of things when that brokenness hits. And so our level of involvement in their lives might determine the possibility of them turning to a family of faith.
Sure. Well, guys, this has been great. We've got less than a minute left, and I just want to say thank you for being here. It's neat to get a glimpse of a conversation that's going on in youth ministry, what's happening, and just want to pray for your guys' ministry that it's blessed. And I want to thank you for joining us, being able to be here to hear the challenges in youth ministry and some things that are going on. Reflections is sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministry. We're striving to do God's work with human hands, and this is an extension of that ministry. So God bless you. Check this out on the web at www.paducah2.org. Go over to the video section on the left-hand side of the web page, and then scroll down after you get into the video link to Reflections, and you can see this and a variety of other programs that we've taped based on some of the interesting topics that we look at. So thank you guys, and thank you for being with us. God bless. In mission.